Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sarah, and as always, I'm not alone today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. And today's episode feels especially important.
Yes, today we're talking about a word many people use, but very few people truly understand: burnout.
And if you're listening to this thinking, I feel tired all the time, but don't know why, this episode is for you.
When people hear the word burnout, they often think it simply means being very tired. They imagine long work hours, lack of sleep, or temporary exhaustion that can be fixed with a short break or a vacation. But burnout is not ordinary tiredness, and it's not something that disappears after a weekend of rest. Burnout is deeper, slower, and more complex. It builds quietly over time, often while a person is still functioning, still working, still showing up for others. What makes burnout confusing is that from the outside, nothing may look wrong. A person can still be productive, responsible, and reliable, while inside they feel empty, disconnected, and emotionally drained. Burnout affects motivation, concentration, emotions, and even how someone sees themselves. It doesn't just take energy away, it slowly takes meaning away.
That's such an important point. Burnout isn't a sudden collapse, it's more like a gradual erosion. It happens when the demands placed on a person consistently exceed the emotional, mental, or physical resources they have available. And what makes it worse is that many people experiencing burnout don't recognize it right away. They assume they're just not trying hard enough, not organized enough, or not strong enough. In reality, burnout is often a sign that someone has been strong for too long without enough support, rest, or acknowledgement. It's not a personal failure. It's a signal, a warning from the mind and body that something in the system is unsustainable.
Another misunderstanding is thinking of burnout as a moment, a breakdown, a dramatic stopping point. But burnout is actually a state where emotional energy is constantly depleted, where effort no longer leads to satisfaction, and where even small tasks start to feel heavy. People in burnout often describe feeling numb rather than emotional. They don't feel extreme sadness or anger. They feel flat, disconnected, and indifferent. This numbness is important to understand. It's not laziness, and it's not lack of care. It's the nervous system trying to protect itself after long periods of pressure. When caring becomes exhausting instead of meaningful, the mind starts shutting down emotional responses to survive.
And that's why burnout can be so frightening. Because people don't just lose energy, they lose interest. Things that once mattered stop feeling important. Goals feel distant. Even success feels empty. And because society often praises productivity and endurance, many people push through burnout instead of addressing it. They keep going because stopping feels irresponsible, selfish, or impossible. But burnout doesn't resolve itself through more discipline or more effort. In fact, pushing harder usually deepens it. Burnout requires understanding, not judgment. Awareness, not denial.
One of the most misunderstood aspects of burnout is the belief that it happens because someone is weak, unmotivated, or incapable of handling responsibility. In reality, burnout most often affects people who are highly responsible, deeply committed, and emotionally invested. These are the people who care, who try to do things properly, who feel a sense of duty, not only toward their work, but toward others. Burnout grows in environments where effort is constant, but recovery is rare, where expectations increase, but support stays the same. Burnout happens when giving becomes one-sided for too long, when energy flows outward into work, family, studies, or emotional care without enough space for rest, reflection, or replenishment. Over time, the system breaks down, not because the person is failing, but because the balance is broken.
Yes, and what makes burnout especially dangerous is that it often develops silently. There's no clear moment where someone can say, "This is when it started." Instead, it builds through small compromises, skipping rest, ignoring emotional discomfort, telling yourself, "I'll deal with this later." Each individual decision seems harmless, even responsible, but together they create a pattern of self-neglect that slowly drains emotional reserves. Many people experiencing burnout are praised by others. They're seen as reliable, strong, capable, and that external validation can actually delay awareness. When everyone depends on you, stopping feels like letting people down. So you continue, even when your inner world is asking you to slow down.
Another key cause of burnout is emotional overload. This is especially common in caregiving role, teachers, healthcare workers, managers, parents, and people who are emotionally available to others. Emotional labor requires constant attention to other people's needs, feelings, and reactions. When this becomes unbalanced, when there's no space to process your own emotions, burnout becomes almost inevitable. Emotional burnout doesn't come from one intense moment. It comes from holding too much for too long without relief. It's the exhaustion that comes from being on, all the time listening, supporting, adjusting, explaining, managing emotions while your own emotional needs remain unspoken or unmet.
And for many women, this emotional overload is normalized. Society often teaches women to be patient, understanding, and emotionally available, even at their own expense. Saying "I'm tired" is often interpreted as weakness. Saying "I can't do this anymore" is seen as failure. So instead, many women internalize exhaustion and continue functioning until burnout becomes unavoidable. Burnout, in this sense, is not just personal, it's cultural. It reflects systems that reward sacrifice and punish rest. Understanding this helps remove shame. Burnout is not something to hide. It's something to understand.
Although burnout is often associated with work, it's important to understand that burnout can occur in any area of life. Students experience academic burnout. Caregivers experience emotional burnout. People in unstable environments experience survival burnout. Even relationships can be a source of burnout when they require constant effort without mutual care. Burnout is about prolonged imbalance, not location. Wherever there is continuous pressure without restoration, burnout can develop. That's why simply changing jobs or routines doesn't always fix it. If the underlying pattern remains, overgiving, overfunctioning, self-erasure burnout will return in a new form.
This is also why advice like "just take a break" often feels insufficient. Rest is important, but burnout isn't cured by sleep alone. Burnout requires deeper changes: boundaries, emotional honesty, realistic expectations, and sometimes uncomfortable self-reflection. It asks people to rethink how they define success, responsibility, and worth. For English learners, it's useful to notice how burnout is discussed in serious contexts. You might hear, "Burnout results from chronic stress." "Burnout affects mental health and performance." "Preventing burnout requires structural change." The language is calm, analytical, and respectful, because burnout is not a personal flaw but a human response to prolonged strain.
One of the most difficult things about burnout is that people often don't recognize it while it's happening. They don't suddenly wake up one day and think, I am burned out. Instead, burnout disguises itself as normal life. Tiredness feels like responsibility. Emotional numbness feels like maturity. Detachment feels like efficiency. And because these states are socially rewarded, people rarely question them. Burnout doesn't always look dramatic. It often looks like functioning. You still show up. You still complete tasks. You still respond to messages. But internally, something has shifted. Joy feels distant. Motivation feels forced. Even rest doesn't feel restorative anymore.
Yes, and that's where burnout becomes especially dangerous. When it's invisible, many people experiencing burnout believe they are simply failing at life. They tell themselves they are lazy, ungrateful, or unmotivated. They compare their inner exhaustion to other people's outer productivity and conclude that something is wrong with them. In reality, burnout is not about laziness, it's about depletion. When emotional and mental resources are drained, the brain switches into survival mode. Creativity decreases, patience disappears, small tasks feel overwhelming. This isn't weakness, it's a nervous system asking for relief.
Another sign of burnout that people rarely talk about is emotional numbness. Many expect burnout to feel like sadness or crying, but often it feels like nothing. No excitement, no curiosity, no strong emotional reactions at all. People describe it as feeling flat or empty. This numbness is not a lack of emotion, it's a protective response. When the system has been overloaded for too long, it shuts down emotional sensitivity to prevent further harm. While this helps in the short term, over time it creates distance from life itself.
And this emotional shutdown often confuses people. They start questioning their relationships, their goals, even their identity. They wonder why things that once mattered now feel meaningless. This can lead to impulsive decisions, quitting suddenly, withdrawing socially, or assuming that the problem is everything around them. Burnout doesn't mean your life is wrong. It means your capacity has been exceeded. Without recognizing this, people risk changing everything except the one thing that actually needs care themselves.
Burnout also deeply affects how people see themselves. When someone's identity is built around being capable, reliable, or strong, burnout feels like a personal collapse. Losing energy feels like losing value. Slowing down feels like failure. This creates shame, and shame keeps burnout hidden. Many people continue pushing themselves not because they want to, but because they don't know who they are without productivity. Burnout then becomes not just exhaustion, but an identity crisis.
That's why recovery from burnout is rarely just physical. It requires redefining worth. Learning that value does not disappear when output decreases. That rest is not a reward, it's a requirement, and that being human includes limits. In academic and professional English, burnout is discussed carefully for this reason. You might see phrases like, burnout impacts long-term well-being. Burnout reduces engagement and effectiveness. Addressing burnout requires systemic support. Notice how the language removes blame. It focuses on impact, not judgment.
People ignore burnout because acknowledging it feels inconvenient. It disrupts routines. It challenges expectations. It forces uncomfortable conversations. It asks people to disappoint others and themselves. So instead, many normalize suffering. But ignoring burnout doesn't make it disappear. It makes it deeper. And eventually, the body and mind will force a stop through illness, emotional breakdown, or complete withdrawal.
Burnout is not a sudden failure. It's a long process of being unheard, especially by yourself. Learning to recognize it early is an act of self-respect. And understanding the word burnout deeply helps English learners talk about mental health with accuracy, empathy, and confidence.
Before we end, I want to say something important. If anything we talked about today felt familiar, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you've been carrying a lot, maybe for longer than you realized. Burnout isn't a personal failure. It's information. It's your mind and body asking for care, balance, and honesty.
And understanding words like burnout helps us name experiences that often stay silent. When we have language, we gain clarity. When we have clarity, we can make gentler, wiser choices for ourselves and for others. Learning vocabulary deeply isn't just about English, it's about understanding life more accurately.
So take a moment after this episode. Check in with yourself. Notice what feels heavy. Notice what feels empty. Awareness is not the end, it's the beginning.
We'll meet you in the next episode.